Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back. That's the third video of the series of making the Soldiers vs Zombies game using Unity. I advise you who haven't seen the other videos yet to see them, because each video depends on the previous one. And this one depends on the first and the second videos. Alright, so in this video we are gonna make the enemies and allies take damage and destroy them when their life is 0. Let's go through it. Let's start creating an empty object for the projectile with a sprite renderer and set the sprite to this bullet image, and the ordering layer should be 4. This image is too big compared with our scene, so let's change its scales to 0.7. I think the size is better. Now let's add a rigid body to move the bullet and a capsule collider to detect the collision with allies and enemies, and also set its trigger to true. Then let's create a projectile script. As this project will be used from enemies and allies, I'm gonna create an attribute to store the collision tag to identify the tag where this bullet can collide. To detect collision, we will need onTriggerEntity2D method and then compare the collider's tag with the collision tag variable. I'm gonna add a to-do comment here just to remember where I should call the take damage from the character. And of course, when the bullet collides with something, it should be destroyed. Going back to Unity, first, let's attach the projectile script to the projectile game object. Second, let's reset its position, and then create a prefab and delete it from the scene. And finally, let's create a projectile layer and set it to the projectile prefab. Great! Now let's set up the layers, tags, and colliders for allies and enemies prefabs. Let's create a tag and a layer for ally and set them to the ally fence prefab. And also, let's add a box collider so the enemy can be detected. And the same for the ally survival. The tag and the layer should be set to ally and also add a collider to it. For the enemy, let's create a layer enemy and set it to it. In order to set up the start position reference of the enemy's bullet, I'm gonna create a firepoint game object just close to it and set the rotation Z to 90 because the bullet should go from fire position towards to the left. Going back to the enemy script, let's create a field to represent the ally layer and another one to represent its fire rate, and also a property called distance to attack, because the enemy should stop moving and start attacking when it reaches a certain distance to the ally. Let's scroll down to the fixed updated method and use raycast to check if there is any ally at the same road within a certain distance. The first parameter of the raycast method is the origin, which will be the enemy's position. The second one is the direction, as it will be always left. Let's set this to new vector2 with x equals to -1. And the third is the distance, and the latest one is the layer. In that case, will be the ally layer. If collide is not null, in other words, if it has detected an ally, it should stop. So let's set the rigid body velocity to 0, and let me add a debug when it collides. And also a visual debug using onDrawGizmo method to show a red line just in front of the zombie with the distance set in the distance to attack variable. I almost forgot to add an else for this if, otherwise the player won't stop. Let's fix this, adding an else and moving this line of code to under the else block. Now it's better. The enemy will stop to attack or it will walk, but never both at the same time. Another improvement in this code should be replacing this new vector2 by the static property left from vector2, which is the same as we had before, but cleaner to read. As each enemy can have different distance to attack, we should create this attribute also in the enemy stats and pass this value from the enemy stats to the enemy in the enemy spawner script. Now it's time to set up the enemy unit. So going to the enemy prefab, let's set the ally layer in the enemy script and set the distance to attack in the enemy stats. So the enemy with a silencer let's set it to 1, the enemy with a gun to 2, and the enemy with a machine to 3. Let's test all those changes. If I add a new fence and also allies on the roads, the zombies should stop. Cool, they stopped. And if I zoom in, we can see the gizmos we've created and all zombies stopped when the raycast detected allies. Oh good, now let's make the enemies attack. I'm gonna create one script that will be used by enemies and allies, so I will call it character attack. First, let's set the field's projectile prefab and the fire point position. Second, we will need a method to do the attack with the projectile force and the tag parameters. The tag will be useful to identify if this bullet is to make damage on allies or it is to make damage on enemies. Let's instantiate a new projectile, passing the fire point position and rotation, and set the projectile's collision tag with the value from the tag parameter. Let's make this bullet move with its rigid body using the edge force method, passing the fire point up position times the force passed by parameter. And as we want to add an instant force impulse to the rigid body, let's use the force mode impulse. And then let's set a time to live of 5 seconds for it, because there will be cases where the bullet won't collide with characters, and we want to make sure that the projectile will be destroyed after some time. Now, let's use the attack method in the enemy script. First, let's create 3 fields, one to represent the character attack, another one for the attack power, and the third field to track the last time attack. That will be useful to control the fire rate. As now we have the input for attack, let's create the attack method and call the character.attack passing the power and the ally tag name, because the projectile will make damage only in allies. The attack function should be called when the enemy is stopped, but if we simply call it in the fixed update, it will instantiate a new projectile in every frame. So, to control the fire rate, let's store the last time attack in a variable and also get the difference in seconds from the last time attack to the current time. If that difference is greater or equals than the variable fire rate in seconds, we should attack and update the last time attack. If not, it should do nothing. As we already tested that the enemy is stopping at the right moment, we can remove this log, but now I want to add another log to know when the attack has been called. We've created the power field in enemy, but we never set a value for it. So let's go to the enemy start script, create a power attribute in the enemy starts with 1 as the full value, and pass this value to the enemy in the enemy spawner script. Now, we can go back to Unity to set up the enemy prefab. First, let's add the character attack into it. Second, update the fire point and the projectile prefab into the character attack component. Third, update the character attack of the enemy component. And finally play. Let's add some allies into the scene and check if the enemies are attacking. Lovely, the enemies are stopping and attacking the allies. Now, let's make the allies attack too. We have 2 different types of allies. The survivor, which attacks, and defenses, which won't attack. And both use the ally script. Let's make a small refactoring to split the ally script into 2 scripts. One will remain as ally, and the other one will be called shooter ally, which will inherit from ally. Great! And to speed up the process, I'm gonna copy the code from enemy into the ally shooter script. Let's copy the fire rate, the character attack, and the power attributes into ally. And also, let's copy the attack method and call it in the fixed updated. Now, let's set the power for our ally. Let's open the ally start script and create a float called power with 1 as default. And then go to the ally slot where it's the place the allies are instantiated. We should set the power only for shooters, and to do this, we can check if the type of the ally is shooter ally. If that is true, I can do a cast and set the power of the ally to receive the power of the ally stats. Now, let's go back to Unity and update the ally survivor to use the ally shooter instead of the ally. So let's open the ally prefab, add the shooter script, and remove the ally one. We haven't added the character attack to the ally, so it's time to do, and also set it to shooter ally script. Now let's set up the character ally with the fire point. I will need a new game object called fire point and move it close to the gun and change its rotation Z to -90. Okay, now let's update the fire point and the projectile in the character attack component. And the last thing before tested, as we updated the ally survivor script to use the shooter ally, the ally survivor stats lost the prefab reference. So let's open it and update the ally prefab reference. Now let's play and see if it's working. Let's add a survivor ally into the scene and it should immediately start attacking. Nice, worked, but I see a bug that the projectile coming from the enemy are not being destroyed. Let's go to our ally shooter script and check what's going on. Alright, I believe I found the problem. It's a typical copy and paste problem. I forgot to update the collision tag to enemy. Let's test again. Let's add some allies into the board and see if the bullet is destroyed when they collide with an enemy. Great, they are being destroyed. The allies and enemies are attacking but they are not taking damage. Let's make it happen. First, let's create a script to manage the life of the characters, called Life Manager, with two properties. One will be full life and the other one will be just life. The Life Manager should have events saying that the properties were changed. So let's create an event to be invoked when the life has been changed and another one when the full life has been changed. And then let's invoke them under the set method of each property. The question mark dot before the invoke means that it should evaluate the first operand. If that's null, just stop. On the other words, in the case the event has not been listened, it doesn't need to invoke. And the last thing here, when the full life has been changed, I want also to update the life. Again, I did the copy-paste problem and almost left the onLifeChanged method passing the full life instead of life. Let's fix this. Now, let's create another new script called iTakeDamage. This will be an interface with one method called takeDamage, and the ally and the enemy script should implement it. Let's open the ally script and implement the method takeDamage and also create a field for the life manager. So, every time a character takes damage, its life should be decreased. Let's also make the life manager internal, and the same for enemy script. Let's add a life manager field to it. Implement the iTakeDamage interface, make the life manager internal, and under the takeDamage method, decrease its life. Now let's create a field for the full life value of the enemy and ally. Let's open the ally stats script and add a full life variable and set the full value of it to 3. And let's do the same for the enemy stats. Cool, now let's set to the instance when they are spawned. First, in the enemy spawner, the enemy should receive the full life from enemy stats. And for the ally, let's open the ally slot script and set its full life to receive the value of the full life from the ally stats. Now, let's add the awake method to listen to the onLifeChanged event. So, every time this event has been invoked, the method handleLifeChanged will be called. I'm gonna rename the second parameter to life and check if it's equal to 0. If that's true, the game object should be destroyed. Now, let's also listen to the onLifeChanged event in the enemy script and destroy the game object in the handleLifeChanged method when life is equals to 0. But for this, let's use the method removeEnemy from the level manager, because later on I want to compute how many enemies were destroyed, and this computation I'm gonna do in the level manager script. Okay, so for this, let's change the method removeEnemy to internal and call it in the enemy script. The enemy is destroyed when it reaches the end line, And now, it can also be destroyed by an ally. We have two scenarios where an enemy can be destroyed. But as you can see, the code responsible for calling the start level method is in the enemy reached end line only, so it can cause a bug to start a new level. To fix this, we can simply move the block of if to be in the remove enemy method. Doing this, the validation will be called from both, as the method enemy reached the end line calls the remove enemy method. Now let's set up the enemy and ally to use the life manager script. First, let's attach the life manager into the enemy prefab. Second, let's add it into the ally prefab and also attach it into the ally fence. As the enemies and allies have life manager, we need to set them up into their respective ally and enemy script. But instead of set it manually, let's do it via code. So going back to the ally script, let's get the life manager component on awake and remove the serializable field from the life manager attribute. It also applies for enemy. Let's get the life manager component on awake and remove the serializable field from the life manager attribute here as well. Now it's time to update the Projectile script to call the take damage method. As the enemies and allies implement the I take damage interface, it's safe to get the I take damage component from the collider and then call the method take damage. After all these changes, let's test it. So we should see the allies and enemies being destroyed after taking 3 hits. Let's add some fences and survivors and see what happens. That's great, it works. After 3 shots, they are being destroyed. That's all for today, guys. Thank you for watching this video and I hope you are enjoying it. In the next video, we will create a system to gain coins when an enemy has been killed and use the coins to add allies to the board. I will let the link of the branch with the code and assets that I used in this tutorial in the description below. See you in the next video. Thank you and bye!